Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And welcome, word wranglers and plot pioneers. You've just tuned into the Scribe Vibe with Janae, the podcast that turns aspiring authors into literary legends faster than you can say bestseller. I'm Janae, your friendly word guru, here to demystify the wide world of words and publishing. Whether you're battling writer's block or navigating the treacherous waters of query letters, I've got your back. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the craft of writing, unveiling the secrets of compelling characters, plot twists that'll make your readers gasp, and prose so smooth it practically reads itself. We'll tackle the nitty-gritty of getting published, from finding the perfect agent to avoiding those sneaky vanity presses. But wait, there's more. Stick around for our Writer's Talk, where we shine the spotlight on up-and-coming authors. They'll spill the tea on their writing journeys, share tidbits about their books, and maybe even reveal the secret writing snack. Spoiler alert, it's usually coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. So whether you're pitting the next great American novel or just trying to finish that short story you started 3 years ago, the Scribe Vibe is your go-to source for inspiration, information, and the occasional dad joke about grammar. Grab your favorite writing tool, find a cozy spot, and let's turn that blank page into literary magic. It's time to catch the Scribe Vibe. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of the Scribe Vibe with Janae. This is the podcast where we dive deep into the world of writing, creativity, and the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Janae. Whether you're a seasoned author, aspiring novelist, or simply in love with the written word, you've come to the right place. Each episode, we'll explore the ins and outs of writing, share tips and tricks to boost creativity, and uncover the secret behind crafting a compelling narrative. From plot development to character creation and everything in between, we'll cover it all with a fresh, vibrant perspective. Get ready to vibe with fellow writers, gain inspiration from industry experts, and tap into your inner scribe. So grab your favorite writing tool, settle in your most comfortable spot, and let's embark on a literary journey together. Remember, every great story starts with a single word. Let's make yours count. Plotting a story can sometimes feel like solving a puzzle. Pieces need to align perfectly to create a cohesive and engaging narrative. Traditionally, writers are taught to start at the beginning, building their plot from the ground up. However, this method can sometimes feel restrictive or lead to roadblocks. You might find yourself hitting dead ends or having to rewrite large sections of your work. For many writers, traditional plotting comes with its own set of challenges. You have to carefully pace your story from start to finish, trying to maintain tension, introduce key plot points, and ensure that your characters develop naturally along the way. But what happens when you're not quite sure how to get from point A to B? Or what if the big reveal or final twist feels distant or unclear as you plot from the beginning? This can lead to gaps in your story or places where the stakes fall flat. Now, imagine having the freedom to begin with your destination in mind, to construct your narrative backwards. Yeah, we're doing that. This is where reverse plotting comes in. Instead of starting from the beginning, You begin with the end, working your way backwards to create a roadmap up to your opening scenes. This approach can offer a fresh perspective on the structure of your story, helping you connect dots more effectively. So, what exactly is reverse plotting? And how does it differ from traditional methods? Well, reverse plotting, as the name suggests, is a storytelling technique where you begin with the conclusion or climax of your story and work your way backward to the beginning. By starting with the resolution of the key moments you want to build for, you can lay down a clear path to your story's opening. It's almost like knowing the destination of your journey and figuring out the best route to get there. There are several benefits to working backwards through your plot. First and foremost, it ensures that your main story remains tightly focused. You know exactly where your story needs to go. So every scene, every moment has a clear purpose that leads to the final payoff. This method also allows you to identify plot holes early on and make adjustments before you get too far into your writing process. Additionally, it can help you craft more effective twists and turns since you'll have a clear vision of what needs to be foreshadowed. Reverse plotting differs from traditional methods in its flexibility. Traditional plotting requires you to build your story step by step, but reverse plotting allows you to think strategically about how each moment serves the larger narrative. This method encourages you to focus on the most impactful elements of your story first: the climax, the final confrontation, the character's revelations, so that every earlier scene works in service of that moment. Now that we've introduced the concept, let's dive into the steps involved in reverse plotting and how you can apply this technique to your writing process. The first step in reverse plotting is to begin with your story's ending. Ask yourself, what is the ultimate resolution? How do you want your story to conclude? This could be the final battle, the emotional resolution of the character's arc, or a major twist that changes the course of your story's world. By pinpointing the conclusion, you give yourself a clear target to work towards. Knowing your destination helps ensure that every preceding event builds logically toward the final moment. Once you have an ending in mind, the next step is to map out the key plot points leading up to it. Start by breaking down the major events that need to occur for the ending to make sense. These are your story's turning points, the moments that push your narrative forward. Work backwards from the ending, asking what needs to happen before this. This will give you a clear sense of progression and help you create a logical, connected storyline that flows naturally. Character development is a critical part of any story, and reverse plotting can offer new insights into your character's arcs. Start by determining where your characters end up emotionally and physically. By the story's conclusion, are they transformed? Have they achieved their goals or failed? Once you've established their endpoint, work backwards to map out key decisions, challenges, and conflicts that shape their journey. This method ensures that your character's growth feels organic and aligns with your story's major events. In any good story, one event should naturally lead to the next. When reverse plotting, it's essential to establish clear cause and effect relationships between your plot points. Working backwards allows you to trace connections between key moments and ensure that each event logically follows the previous one. This way, your plot remains cohesive and avoids feeling disjointed or episodic. Every action should have a consequence that ripples through the narrative, ultimately shaping the ending you began. Now that we've covered the steps, let's explore the specific benefits that reverse plotting offers your story. By starting with the ending and working backwards, you can create a more cohesive narrative. Reverse plotting forces you to think strategically about how each plot point fits the larger picture, ensuring that everything leads smoothly to the conclusion. This method helps you eliminate unnecessary scenes and tangents, resulting in a tighter, more focused story. When you know the ending from the start, you're better equipped to lay the groundwork for key revelations and twists throughout your story. Reverse plotting allows you to plant subtle clues early on that will pay off later, making your foreshadowing more deliberate and effective. This creates a richer reading experience where your audience can look back and see how the pieces all fit together. Reverse plotting can also enhance your character development by allowing you to shape their growth in a more purposeful way. Since you're working backwards from the final transformation, you can clearly map out the obstacles and conflicts that drive the evolution. This results in characters whose arcs are more consistent and impactful, as each decision they make has a direct impact on the story's outcome. Finally, reverse plotting helps you improve overall plot consistency. By working from the ending and tracing your way back, you're less likely to overlook important details or create plot holes. You can track the logical progression of the events and ensure that everything fits together, making it easier to maintain continuity and avoid contradictions in your story. Now that you have a solid understanding of the reverse plotting process and its advantages, let's explore some practical tips to help you implement it effectively. When reverse plotting, organization is key. You're essentially working backwards through your story. So it's helpful to use visual tools to track your plot and character arcs. Timeline charts can help you see the sequence of events clearly, and sticky notes or index cards are great for moving plot points around as you develop your story. You can use mind mapping software or plotting apps to keep everything organized. These tools allow you to stay flexible and make adjustments as your plot evolves. Reverse plotting isn't just for the main storyline. It's useful for managing subplots and secondary characters. Start by considering how these subplots will intersect with your main narrative. Work backward from their conclusion to see how they align and contrast the primary story. Make sure that each subplot has a clear purpose and ties to the overall narrative. The same goes for secondary characters. Think about how their journeys contribute to the larger story and develop their arcs with the same care you give to your protagonist. While reverse plotting gives you a clear roadmap, it's important to remain flexible. You might discover new ideas and character motivations that change the direction of your story. The key is to balance the predetermined elements, like your ending or major plot points, with creative freedom. If something unexpected emerges, don't be afraid to adjust your plan. Reverse plotting should guide you, not box you. Use it as a tool for structure, but stay open to creativity along the way. Like any writing technique, reverse plotting comes with its own set of challenges. Let's look at some common ones and how you can navigate them. One of the most significant challenges of reverse plotting is keeping your story suspenseful when you already know the ending. I've run into this quite a few times, especially with the current book that I'm writing, Pexels, which is the second book to the Bayou Betrayal series. And it's been hard knowing what the ending is going to be, but trying to keep myself motivated to continue the story. The trick is to focus on how you reveal the information to your audience. Just because you know how things will turn out doesn't mean your readers do. Keep the pacing tight. Introduce twists and turns and withhold key details to build tension. Foreshadowing is a powerful tool here. Just because the end is clear doesn't mean the journey should be predictable. Working backwards can sometimes lead to overly intricate or convoluted plots. As you try to make everything fit perfectly, it's easy to fall into the trap of overthinking cause and effect relationships, making your plot too complicated for your readers to follow. To avoid this, regularly take a step back and evaluate whether each plot point is essential to your story. Keep the core of your plot simple and make sure that every scene serves the larger narrative. It's okay to have layers, but clarity should always be your priority. As you write, you may encounter new ideas that weren't part of your original reverse plot. These moments of inspiration can be exciting, but they may also throw you off your plan. Trust me, I know about this one as well. The key is to remain adaptable. If a new idea improves the story, find ways to incorporate it without disrupting the entire structure. Sometimes this means revisiting your reverse plot and making adjustments. Don't be afraid to evolve your plan. Reverse plotting is meant to give you foundation, not restrict you from exploring new directions. Reverse plotting is a technique that many authors across different genres have used to great effect. Let's explore a few examples from literature to see how this method has been successfully implemented. Some of the most well-known mysteries and thrillers have been reverse plotted to ensure tight, suspenseful narratives. Take Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, for example. Flynn started with the twist and worked backwards, carefully planting clues throughout the novel that lead to a jaw-dropping reveal. By knowing the ending in advance, she was able to ensure that every plot detail aligned perfectly, creating a satisfying and surprising payoff for her readers. Another great example is J.K. Rowling, who's reverse plotted the Harry Potter series, especially when it came to major revelations like the prophecy in the Order of the Phoenix and the Horcruxes in the Half-Blood Prince. By starting with the key plot points she wanted to reveal in the later books, Rowling was able to carefully craft earlier scenes, characters, and dialogue to foreshadow these elements. Authors who use reverse plotting often highlight its ability to streamline the writing process. Many writers report that reverse plotting helps them to avoid writing themselves into a corner or creating plot holes. They also mention that reverse plotting allows them to focus on making sure every scene serves a purpose and contributes to the final resolution. This method ensures that no plot threads are left dangling, and readers feel like the story comes full circle by the end. For example, mystery writers often rely on reverse plotting to plant red herrings and misdirection while ensuring the real solution is properly set up. Writers of intricate fantasies and thrillers also find reverse plotting helpful for managing multiple subplots and character arcs without losing sight of the overall goal. While reverse plotting is a powerful tool, it doesn't have to be used in isolation. In fact, many authors successfully combine it with more traditional writing techniques to create a well-rounded narrative. One way to blend reverse plotting with traditional elements is by using reverse plotting for the major events and twists in your story, while still employing a traditional outline to map out your scenes chronologically. For example, you can start by reverse plotting your end and key turning points, then shift to a forward-moving outline that fills in the details between these moments. This approach allows you to use the clarity of reverse plotting for your big picture structure, while retaining the flexibility of traditional outlining for individual scenes and character moments. Another method is to begin with reverse plotting to construct the backbone of your story. Then shift into a traditional outline as your story progresses. This can be especially useful if you enjoy the discovery writing process but want to ensure you're working towards a concrete ending. I have used this technique multiple times, and with the current project that I'm working on, I know what my ending of this particular novel is going to be. I also know what the overarching ending of the series is going to be. And I use traditional outlining for the chapters. I have outlined every single chapter with every single beat that I'm going to hit in that particular chapter traditionally. But I've reverse plotted the book itself beforehand. So it works. Trust me, I've done this. Even if you prefer traditional plotting while writing your first draft, reverse plotting can be an excellent tool during the revision and editing stages. By reviewing your story from the end backwards, you can assess whether your events in your narrative logically connect and build towards the resolution. This method allows you to identify plot holes, inconsistencies, or unnecessary subplots that detract from your story. Additionally, reverse plotting during revision helps to strengthen foreshadowing. Once you know exactly how your story unfolds, you can go back to its earlier sections and insert hints and clues that will make your final twist or climax even more impactful for readers. Using reverse plotting as revision techniques ensures that your narrative is tightly woven and cohesive while still maintaining flexibility during the initial drafting process. Okay, as we wrap up today's episode, let's take a quick look back at what we've covered. We've explored the concept of reverse plotting, breaking down its key benefits, such as improved narrative cohesion, better foreshadowing, and stronger character development. We've also discussed practical tips for implementing reverse plotting, common challenges you may face, and how to integrate this technique with other writing methods. Reverse plotting offers a powerful way to structure your story from the ground up. By starting with your ending and working your way backward, you can create a more cohesive and compelling narrative. Avoid plot holes. Ensure that each scene contributes to the final outcome. It's also a great tool for adding depth to your characters and keeping your plot consistent. Whether you're writing thrillers, mysteries, or epic fantasies, reverse plotting can be a game changer in your writing process. Now, we have covered the concept of reverse plotting, a unique approach to structuring your story by starting at the end and working your way backwards. We began by discussing traditional plotting, which can sometimes lead to plot holes, pacing issues, and loss of narrative direction. We broke down the reverse plotting process, starting with the editing, ending, to identify key plot points, to developing character arcs and cause and effect relationships in reverse order. Next, we talked about practical tips for getting started, such as using tools like timeline charts and sticky notes to organize your ideas, handling subplots and secondary characters, and balancing creative flexibility with structured plotting. We also address common challenges like maintaining suspense, avoiding overly complicated plots, and adapting to new ideas during the writing process. Finally, we discussed real-world examples of authors who have successfully used reverse plotting, such as Gillian Flynn and J.K. Rowling. We also looked at how reverse plotting can be combined with traditional outlining methods or used during the revision process to tighten your story and ensure consistency. If you're looking for a way to add more structure to your story and make sure every scene is working towards a satisfying conclusion, reverse plotting is definitely worth exploring. I encourage you to give reverse plotting a try. Whether you're starting a new project or revising an existing one, it might feel unfamiliar at first, but it can lead to a surprising discovery about your characters and your plot. Plus, it's a great way to keep your writing focused and on track as you work towards a well crafted conclusion. Before we close out, I'd like to remind you to check out my website at www.Janae writes with an S, books with an S.com for more resources and upcoming events. You can also find all of my books, there are 8 of them, and you can find my blog. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have any questions, feel free to write me at Janae C at JanaeWritesBooks.com. Make sure to put the word yes in the subject line to remind me of your intent. You can also support my work or this podcast at reamstories.com/Janae's with an S, dark romance, all one word. And don't forget to tune in next week. We'll have Joseph Macchilino on the show, and we'll be diving into the fascinating topic of the Enneagram for characters, building personalities based on psychological types. If you're interested in crafting complex, multidimensional characters, you won't want to miss this one. Now, let's move on to the next segment of the show, Writer's Talk with Janae. This week, I'm thrilled to have Cathy Fyock as our special guest. Cathy is the author of Writer Crisis Hotline, a valuable resource for writers navigating creative blocks, burnout, and everything in between. She's also a book coach for nonfiction writers, and she will give her information within the show. So if you're a nonfiction writer, stay tuned. We'll discuss her insights on managing the ups and downs of the writing life and how to keep pushing forward even when the words don't come. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Scribe Vibe with Janae. If you're tuning into YouTube, thank you for liking and subscribing. And now, Writer's Talk. Welcome to Writer's Talk, the segment where we dive deep into the world of writing and publishing. I'm your host, Janae, and today we're in for a treat. We're joined by Cathy Fyock. Am I saying Fyock? Cathy Fyock, co-author of the insightful book, Writer's Crisis Hotline, and an accomplished book coach. Cathy has helped countless authors navigate the choppy waters of writing and publishing, and today she's here to share her wisdom with us. Whether you're battling writer's block, struggling to finish your manuscript, or you're just looking for some expert advice on the writing process, you're in the right place. Cathy's expert experience as both an author and coach gives her a unique perspective on the challenges writers face. So, grab your notebook and get ready for some invaluable insight. Let's jump right in and explore the world of writing with Cathy Fyock. Cathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Janae. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Good. Can you tell us about Writer Crisis Hotline?
Well, yes, my co-author and I, Allie Pleiter. Allie is a full-time writer and book coach, and she's working on title number 70, I think, right now. So she really knows something about book productivity. But together, we have a group coaching practice, and we do workshops and retreats and programs together. We each have our own separate businesses, but we do this together. We thought it would be really fun to write a book together. So we decided to write a Writer Crisis Hotline. What we found was that so many of our authors, because writing is such a solitary experience, so many writers think I'm the only one who is experiencing writer's block, or I'm the only one who's experiencing imposter syndrome, or whatever it might be. And what we find in our coaching community is that there is power in knowing you're not the only one. There are a lot of people who are dealing with these issues. And so we decided to write this book as a way to help struggling authors everywhere know that they are not alone. We wrote the book as a kind of like a Dear Abby column. So we have folks writing in about their writing crisis, and then we, in the form of Dear Abby, respond to those questions and problems. So it's a really fun way of, first of all, for the reader knowing I'm not the only one who's experienced this. And the other thing that we love about the book, that we continue to hear comments on, if someone is having a problem with, say, imposter syndrome or um, overcoming that negative voice in your head, then they can go to the table of contents and find that specific issue and go to that chapter. So it's several people have said it's like having your own book coach on call or in the room with you, and we love that about this resource.
What inspired you to write Writer Crisis Hotline?
Well, again, hearing so many of our authors experiencing the same kinds of issues over and over again, that we decided that we could write a book that would address those issues. We found that it's really helpful in our coaching practice, because what I found is I can give this to my coaching clients, and if they're having an issue, I can say, okay, turn in your book to page whatever that might be, and the solution for them is right there.
Okay, how did your experience as a book coach influence the contents of this book?
Oh, well, totally influenced it, because we knew what the questions were. We knew what the issues were. So we were able to quickly create a list of all of those issues. And then we took turns in answering them, which was a fun way to write the book. So we basically split the book in half, and we each wrote content, and then we each sort of contributed and provided ideas to each other's content.
Can you describe the most common crisis you encounter with aspiring authors?
Gosh, there are so many. But I guess the facing the blank page is one. Finding time to write is another huge one, because most of the writers that Allie and I work with are experts who are also writing a book about their area of expertise. So they're not writers first and foremost, they're coaches or consultants or speakers. So many of them are needing that they have to squeeze in writing time between everything else that they're doing, or they're doing podcasts, or they're doing some other kind of business. So probably time management maybe is one of the biggest issues. And one of the things that we have learned in our group coaching practice is that 2 minutes can be a powerful writing block. We do a lot of writing prompts with just 2 minutes of writing time. And what that does is it forces folks to shut off the editor, shut off that negative voice, and just get down to the business of writing. So by using that prompt, a 2-minute writing prompt, time and time again, we are training our writers to write quickly and effectively, and not to overthink it. I think that so many authors tend to overthink their writing that they become paralyzed and are unable to write. So we help them just get quickly to it and write in that very short time block.
I just did an episode where I talked about a 2-minute writing rule to get the juices flowing for authors.
Absolutely. I totally support that. I'm totally in agreement with that.
Okay, what's the biggest misconception people have about writing a book?
Oh, the biggest, I think a lot of people think that writing the book is the hardest part. And it is hard. I'm not diminishing the difficulty of writing a book, but sometimes I think authors are startled to learn everything that comes after the writing of the book. So they've written their book, they think, oh, now I can sit back and relax, and the book is just going to go out there and sell itself. Well, it doesn't. And so if we want our books to sell, we have to be out there promoting them, talking about them on social media, doing writing blog posts, going on webcasts or podcasts, and really actively promoting our books. So writing the book is hard, but promoting the book is equally hard.
How do you help authors overcome the fear of starting their book?
Well, what I've learned is that many authors, they have a vague understanding of what their book is going to be, but they haven't gotten down to specifics. So when I start working with an author, I have a strategy session. It's usually a 2-hour session. I send out pre-work for the client to do so that when we are meeting together, they've been thinking about the answers to the questions. And what we're doing is going through and developing the strategic plan for their book that aligns with their business. So we are developing the strategy for, first, what is the purpose of your book? How are you going to use it in your practice? So, for example, when we wrote our book, Writer Crisis Hotline, I knew that I wanted to use it as a coaching tool for my coaching clients. So being very clear on the purpose for that book. The next thing is identifying the thesis statement. Not every book can contain everything you know about the subject. So what is the thesis? What is your take on that topic? Being very clear about the thesis. Then it's defining the targeted reader. Who is the ideal reader? It's not everybody. It's people of a certain generation, or maybe it's women more than men, or maybe it's young versus old. Maybe it's professional people or staff people or whatever. But finding that targeted audience and then creating the structural outline. How is your book going to be divided up, and what are the chapters going to be, and what does that look like from a structural standpoint? And then creating that strategic plan for completing the book.
What strategies do you recommend for writers who struggle with consistency?
Struggling with what? I'm sorry?
Consistency.
Oh, consistency. You mean in terms of their writing practice or writing time to write?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm not a big believer, because my authors are busy professionals. They are often out speaking, they're traveling, they're consulting, they're doing podcasts, they're doing all sorts of things. They can't necessarily write at the same time every day. So my suggestion is that they have a set writing practice, so that as the week is coming up, the upcoming week is ahead of you, you take out your calendar and you schedule your writing time, so that you incorporate at least, I suggest 5 hours of writing each week, so that you are getting that momentum and you're building that momentum as you're working toward your book.
In your experience, what's the main reason why people abandon their book projects?
I think lack of momentum is often, because if someone has momentum, you're seeing it materialize in front of your eyes. You're seeing the word count grow. You're seeing the page count grow. You're seeing all that happen, and that is motivating. We know from brain science that whenever we complete a task or get something else done, it gives us a little hit of dopamine. And that gives us that's a feel-good feeling of, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to move forward with this. And that is really empowering. So Having a regular writing practice that gives you that consistent growth and movement toward your goal. Um, and I think at least 5 hours. I've learned that there's something magical about having at least 5 hours a week to devote to your writing project, because that will have you see enough momentum to keep you going and keep you moving forward. The other thing that I've found is that some authors think that their book needs to contain everything they know. And your book um, can never contain everything you know, and especially if you are a lifelong learner and you're continuing to learn and grow, your book can never contain everything that you know. So at some point, you're going to have to draw a line and say, okay, my book is what I know up to this point, and it can't be the newest thing that you've read or done. Then that'll have to go in the next book.
How does your approach to book coaching differ from other methods?
Well, first of all, I only work with folks who are working on a nonfiction book to grow their business. So I don't work with folks working on works of fiction, although Allie, my co-author, does. I work with folks who are simply writing a book to grow their business. So it may be a memoir, but it is probably something they're going to be speaking or training or keynoting or giving inspirational messaging around, so that they are using that as a launch for their business or their platform or their ministry. So I am working with those authors who are writing that book to grow their business, mission, ministry.
Can you share a success story of an author you've coached who overcame significant obstacles?
Oh, there's so many. uh, I'm launching the audiobook for Writer Crisis Hotline today, and my co-author and I are having a webinar, and we've asked some people to come back and talk about their writer crises. And one of my clients, he was just getting really bogged down of not seeing the benefit or losing track of what the focus of the book was and how it was going to be used. So one of the things that I had him do was write I had him write five-star reviews of his book by an alleged reader who needed his book and found solutions and ideas and so forth in the book. And he found that exercise was so motivating and so clarifying, because it got him really clear about what he wanted to do with his book and how it was going to help the reader. And that kind of clarity he was able then to go on and finish the book, and it's since been released and been very, very successful.
What role does mindset play in successfully completing a book?
Mindset is huge, huge. And one needs to have a confidence in oneself. That is probably one of the biggest mindset issues. To know that, yeah, a book may be hard, a book may be challenging, it's got a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces, but I can do it. I can do it. And maybe that's just by understanding that you build a book one word at a time, one chapter at a time, one section at a time, and to have the confidence to do that. And that's what I hope to give my clients when I'm working with them as a book coach. I give them that confidence that they can do it. And many times my authors, when I'm working with them, they have to say it out loud, and then they get it. They see it by saying it out loud. And sometimes that's the gift that I give my clients. I just repeat back what they've said, what the wonderful words are that they've said. I also find that I record our sessions, so that if they even said something, I ask them a question, well, tell me about this, and they tell me about what they're going to write about. They say, oh my gosh, what did I just say? And I said, well, I'm going to send you the recording so that you can play it back, because you have the answer. You just needed to say it out loud. And so I record those for that very purpose.
How do you help authors deal with imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's huge. And honestly, it's something that Allie and I talk about, because I think one of the interesting stories about Allie, here she is working on book number 70, and you'd think that she would be over imposter syndrome by now. You would think that someone who is authoring 70 books would be well past that she sees herself as a writer and as a successful writer. And yet she knows, because she has a very defined work process, she knows that she's mapped out the work on her book, and she knows that she will finish each book at a certain milestone. And she can predict when her negative voice is going to say to her, this book is crap. You are going, yes, you've been successful up until this point, but you're done. Your career is washed up, because this book is not going to cut it. And I think that's so bizarre that still, with someone with that much success, is still facing imposter syndrome at some point of the journey. And so I tell that to my authors, to say, if you are being visited by that voice that is saying, who do you think you are not alone. Every artist, every writer has that voice, that negative voice, visit them at some point in time, and you have to be ready to deal with it. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that many authors face.
What's your advice for writers who feel their topic has already been covered extensively?
Oh, well, sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I speak on leadership, and I want to write a book on leadership, but it seems like there's so many books on leadership. Do we need another book on leadership? To which I usually respond, have we solved the world's leadership problems? I don't think so. And until we've solved all the problems in the world, it could be that someone's fresh perspective, someone's fresh approach, someone's new idea with a topic that's been around forever may be just the solution that we need. So I think that authors, when they're looking at a sea of books on their topic, it's easy to get discouraged and say, why would anybody need my book? Well, it could be that you are just the voice, just the perspective. You have just the way of saying it that someone else is going to hear and understand, and their problem is going to be solved. So I don't believe that just because someone else has written on that topic doesn't mean that your book isn't really important and that you should write your book.
How important is it to have a writing routine, and how do you help authors establish one?
Well, again, I don't necessarily think it's the same time every day. That's not practical for a lot of authors. But for some authors, it's just figuring out what's going to work for them. And I'll tell you the case of Wendy, one of my clients. She's a busy mom. She's working, starting her business as a speaker, as a consultant. She's doing training. She's doing keynotes. She is really doing a lot of work out there in the world. But she's still a mom, and she still has to wait in the carpool line, and she still has soccer practice and picking up the kids and all of those things. But she has found that she can write her book in little short bursts when she outlines all of what she needs to write, and then she takes and she divides it into chunks so that she knows that this topic is going to have these topics within it. And then what she'll do when she needs to pick up one of the kids at school, she'll take out a Post-it note that has that to do on it, and she'll take that with her and she'll write on her phone while waiting in line, and or she'll either write on her phone or she dictates a lot of her book while she's in the car waiting for the kids. So sometimes it's just finding what it is that works for that author and figuring out the strategy for getting into that routine so that you are contributing regularly to your book's contents.
What are some unique challenges nonfiction authors face compared to fiction writers?
Well, I can't even speak to fiction writers because they're thinking about story and arc and character development and dialogue. But the truth of the matter is that many of those elements are still should exist in nonfiction books. Just because we're writing nonfiction doesn't mean we are not telling stories, that we don't have characters, that we don't have dialogue in our book. But obviously those play a very different role. So understanding the difference that those roles play in your book, I think is very different for fiction and nonfiction. But as I said, my co-author on my book is a fiction writer. I write exclusively nonfiction, so we make a great team.
Okay. How do you help authors find their unique voice in their writing?
That is a great question. So finding your voice can sometimes take some time. I find it especially difficult or challenging when someone is an academic and they have written a thesis, a dissertation. They've done some scholarly writing because it requires a certain form and format. And it's usually not conversationally written, where most of the authors that are coming to me to grow their business and their platform are really wanting to write that book in a very conversational tone. So first of all, it's ditching the how you wrote and did your communication as an academic, and just think about how do you communicate with a friend, a colleague. One of the strategies that I often use is to think about one of your best friends who understands your topic, who understands your area of expertise, and you're sitting down to share an idea with them. You're going to say it not in a scholarly, dry tone of voice. You're going to say it in a way that is excited and conversational, and that's the voice that we want to capture in writing most business books or nonfiction books today. We want something that's conversational, that's accessible, that's approachable. And so finding that voice by tapping into, okay, I'm saying this to a colleague that I really like, that likes what I do, that gets what I do, and having that tone of voice is a way to think about capturing that ideal voice.
What's your perspective on the debate between plotting and pantsing?
Oh, that's a great one. Well, I don't know how pantsers do it. I really don't. Because I am a planner. I like to have it all outlined. I believe in creating the content outline, to getting very, very granular with that outline, and then taking it and not necessarily writing it in order from first chapter to second chapter to third, but writing it in a way that you have energy and a vision and a clarity about maybe chapter 3. So you start there, but because you've already outlined the entire book, you can start anywhere and even jump around from place to place because you have that outline created, and you're going to introduce a concept here perhaps and then revisit it later. And as long as you have it outlined and you know that where you're going to first introduce a concept except maybe even very briefly, and then cover it more deeply. If you have that mapped out, you know exactly what you want to do and how you want to treat it in that chapter. So I'm a big believer in having that very detailed content outline. And I use the post-it method. Many other coaches use this method of outlining your book by using post-its to indicate the different topics and then grouping those on the wall or on a board where you can see them and have those concepts laid out in front of you so that you can write in a way that you're not rewriting and repeating content so that your book doesn't have those redundancies within it.
Okay. How do you advise authors to balance their writing with their other life responsibilities?
Well, sometimes you balance and sometimes you don't. uh, one of my uh, one of my gifts is that I've been able to write my books pretty quickly. With the exception of a couple of my books, I've been able to write my books in less than 6 weeks. And usually, if I'm writing a book within 6 weeks' time, I don't have a life. It's very unbalanced, and I'm really focusing on the book. Um, but many of my authors have to have a more balanced perspective. And so sometimes life does get in the way of your book, and that's just something that happens. I've had authors who have tried to write their book and they have health issues, or a family member has health issues or passes away, or something gets in the way of their book and their progress, and that sometimes just has to be. But I do believe that you decide and you become intentional about your decision, so that if you decide, okay, I'm going to get this book done in 6 weeks, that's really important to me, and I'm going to make some sacrifices in terms of seeing friends or doing fun things so that I can get this book done. It becomes an intention that I set and a priority that I establish for me during that period of time. That may be right for some authors, and it may be absolutely wrong. So, but I say be intentional about whatever you're doing.
What's your approach to helping authors who are stuck in the middle of the book?
Yeah. So oftentimes it's because they haven't fleshed out that outline. They haven't created a wonderful outline that details, and they may get stuck in something that they had maybe a couple of words and they don't have a fully fleshed out outline during that section of the book. So a lot of times it's going back to revisit the outline, getting more granular with that content outline and defining what are the stories that I'm going to tell, what are the key points I'm going to make. Are there tools or exercises that I want to incorporate in this chapter? If I'm speaking on the topic, what are the stories that I tell? What are the examples that I use? So thinking about it in a more granular way. So getting back to that outline and refocusing. Sometimes another technique that I've used is writing a letter to the reader. And with one of my authors, I can recall she got really bogged down in one chapter in particular. And I said, well, go back and rewrite your letter to the reader. What do you want your reader to get? And she actually misunderstood me and wrote a letter for the reader for that chapter, which actually was a perfect exercise for her to do, because she got a real understanding of what the reader's needs were as it related to that topic or that aspect. And so she was able then, once she wrote the letter to the reader about that chapter, she found it incredibly easy to complete the book then.
How do you assist authors in overcoming writer's block?
Well, I think that anytime you're looking at a blank page, it's a danger. So I say, don't start with a blank page. You start with a list of questions. What are the questions that your reader has about your topic? And you always start there. So what is it, and if you've been a consultant or you've been speaking about the topic, then you've had people interact with you about your topic and they've asked you questions before. So what are the questions that they've asked? Start with those questions. So write the list of questions, then write more questions, and then you start by answering a question. And that's much easier for any of us to answer a question than it is to just think of content. For example, if we'd done this interview and you just said to me, Cathy, just tell us a little bit about book writing and what it's all about. I might have been sort of stumped as to where to begin, but you started asking me very specific questions, which allowed me to focus in on the answer to that question. And I was able to share a lot of content with you that we've covered in our discussion so far. So that's the power of questions. So developing the list of questions and then sitting down with that question, and then you're answering the question. That's what your writing is doing.
What role does research play in nonfiction writing, and how do you advise authors to approach it?
Okay, research is a danger zone for many of my authors, especially if they've been speaking and doing consulting, doing coaching about their topic. They know their topic inside and out. So doing research is sometimes what I call productive procrastination. It's putting off the real job of writing the book. So anytime an author says to me, well, I'm going to start by researching, I'm like, no, you don't. You end by researching. And let me explain what I mean. I think you start by writing what you know, and then where you need a data point, where you have a question, where you don't know the answer, but you want to include that in your book, you just make a little box or put a note there to come back and do the research later. So that when you're doing your research, you're not reading widely about your topic. You're looking for exact data points. You're looking for the answer to specific questions and not general issues. So it's a much more focused way of doing research and a much more productive way, so that you're not wasting a lot of time doing endless research about your topic. I would hope that if you're writing a nonfiction book about your area of expertise, that you've been researching your topic nonstop, and that you can write about what you know and then fill in the gaps later by just finding those data points.
How do you help authors stay motivated throughout the writing process?
Well, if they're working with me on a 6-month coaching engagement, and that's what I recommend with my clients, is that the clock is ticking. So they don't have unlimited time to work with me. They have 6 months. So that provides a motivation, a very real motivation. They've invested their money and their time with me, and so we're going to see it through on a time frame. So that's one way. I think another way is to help folks set out a project plan for their whole book. So sometimes it's as simple as this. If for example, when I was writing my book about how to write a book, my first book on writing, I was doing it the title is On Your Mark, from first word to first draft in 6 weeks. So I wanted to have 6 chapters. So if I wanted to do a book in 6 weeks that had 6 chapters, guess what? I needed to do a chapter a week. And so that became my plan. I needed to do at least a chapter a week if I was going to meet my deadline for myself, my self-imposed deadline. So having a project plan for your project and saying, if the book is going to be 30,000 words and you're going to be working on it for X number of weeks. You can do the math and say, I'm going to need to produce X number of words each week in order to meet my goal.
What's your advice for authors who struggle with self-editing?
Oh, self-editing is a big one. I think we all want to write just beautiful prose and that every word just is perfect and doesn't need to be changed ever. And that's just not the truth. You think about great artists and the masterpieces that we see. They are the result of first some pencil sketches and then charcoal sketches and then maybe a rough oil or pastel and then maybe something more detailed. And it's an iterative process. And the same is true of your book. So my philosophy is when you're writing, you are writing. When you are editing, you are editing. And those are two different functions that should be handled at different times. Because here's what we know. I don't claim to know all about brain science, but I know enough to know that writing is a function of one part of our brain and editing is a function of another part of our brain. If we are going back and forth and editing as we write, we are shifting from one part of our brain to the other. And there is a shift of energy from one to the other to the other. And if you're feeling worn out and tired after you've been writing, it's probably because you've been going from editing to writing to editing to writing, which is exhausting. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to shift from one brain function to another. So keep in one lane. We also know it's harder to do creative writing than it is to do editing. It takes a lot more creative energy, juices, power to do that first draft. So here's what you should do. And I love the advice of Annie Lamott, who wrote famously Bird by Bird, one of the famous books on writing. And she says, write that shitty first draft. Just write something, write garbage, but get it on the page, and then we can work with it. Then we can massage it. And that's a different brain function. So I'm a big believer in getting it written, turning off the editor, but that takes discipline. And that's why I think those 2-minute writing prompts are really helpful for doing that. When you just can't write, you can't think in 2 minutes, you can only write. So I'm a big believer in short writing prompts to train our brain.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
What's your perspective on the importance of building an author platform while writing?
It's really important and yet so difficult because many of the authors that I'm working with is like, I can only do one thing at a time. So many of my authors come to me, they've established some platform already for their speaking, their coaching, their consulting, their business. And if they haven't, they're going to have to kind of do both at the same time. I'm working with an author right now that is completely changing her focus and going in a new direction. So she is writing the book and establishing her platform all at the same time, which is a heavy lift. It's a lot of work. So she's pretty much, while she's not writing full time, she is working toward her book platform, probably between writing and doing the marketing. So she's writing blog posts, or she's repurposing pieces from her book to go on her blog. She's doing some video recording. She's doing some podcast appearances. She's doing a lot of different things. So it's not that you can't just write your book and then focus. You have to kind of be doing a little bit at the same time. But hopefully, and many of the authors I work with have done some establishing up front so that they can write their book and then start thinking about how they can integrate their book marketing into their ongoing marketing. So one of the things I recommend you do, for example, is to start by doing a review of your marketing assets. So thinking about, your author or your website, whether you have an author website or not, but you have a website, you have social media, you have um, a resume or a one sheet, or there's all kinds of tools that you may have to promote your business. It's thinking about what are all the assets I have to promote my business, my platform, my ministry, and then incorporating your book into all of those elements so that your whole audience knows about your book.
Okay, where can people find your books? Because I know you have like 12 of them.
Yes, they can all be found on Amazon. So just you can search by name. It's an unusual name, so there's not lots of Cathy Fyocks out there. But my last several books have been about writing. My early books were about human resources and HR topics, but in the last 11 years, all of my writing and focus has been on helping writers and authors.
And where can people find you?
Okay.
What are your handles?
My website, if you can remember my name, you can remember how to find me. My website is cathyfyock.com, and people can send me an email and reach out to me at cathy@cathyfyock.com.
And that wraps up another enlightening episode of Writer's Talk. I want to extend a huge thank you to Cathy for sharing her invaluable insight from Writer Crisis Hotline and her experiences as a book coach. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
To all my listeners out there working on your own writing projects, remember that every word you write is progress. Don't be afraid to seek help when you need it, whether it's from a book like Cathy's, or a writing group, or a coach. And if you've enjoyed today's show, be sure to tune in next week. We air every Sunday, bringing you fresh perspectives and expert advice in the world of writing. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast and leave a review if you found this helpful. Your support helps me continue to bring you quality content. And as always, I leave you with this thought. Remember, writing is a journey, not a race. And I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye, guys. And with that, we've reached another episode ending. I want to thank my guests for joining me on today. And I want to thank my audience for listening to the Scribe Vibe with Janae. I hope you've gained some invaluable insights and feel inspired to continue your own writing journey. Remember, every episode is packed with tips, tricks, and real-life experiences to help you navigate the writing world and publishing. If you've enjoyed our time together, I'd be thrilled if you take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and my YouTube channel, Janae Writes Books. Leave a comment, rating, like, or a review. Your support means the absolute most to me and helps me continue to bring you the content you love. Plus, it allows me to reach even more aspiring writers and book enthusiasts like yourself. For a wealth of additional resources, including writing prompts, book recommendations, and exclusive content, be sure to visit me at my website, www.janaewritesbooks.com. It's your one-stop shop for all things writing and publishing. And hey, if you're an author with a story to tell, I want to hear from you. I'm always on the lookout for incredible guests to feature on the show, whether you're a seasoned pro or a debut author, traditionally published or self-published. If you've got a book you're eager to promote, drop me a line at Janae C. That's JANAEC as in cat at JanaeWritesBooks.com with guests in the subject line. Share a bit about your book, your publication journey, and your launch date, and I'll be in touch to discuss discuss the possibility of having you on the show. Remember, the video portion of this episode will air on my channel on YouTube the day after the podcast episode airs on Spotify or wherever you listen to this. That is Janae Writes Books, found on YouTube. Thank you again for being a part of the Scribe Vibe with Janae community. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and never stop chasing your literary dreams.